this is a clip from a longer interview. In this, Jeff is sharing how the book Instructions for Spiritual Living came into being. You shared a little bit about initially why you actually chose to write this book. I think because I was thinking about that, like what was the inspiration to
Yes.
write this book
Well,
at this
yes.
time?
Yes. Well, the practical reason is since I became part of the Paul Brunton Foundation, I was actually one of the early members in the 1980s,
Yeah.
but I got into published Tibetan Buddhism for 30 years. And so during that time, I was not so active with the foundation. There was another person who was a publisher, and I felt like I was redundant. They didn't need me. They had this other person. But I retired when Snow Lion was sold to Shambhala in 2012, just about 7 years ago now. And I was able, 2 days later, the foundation called me and says, "How would you like to work for the foundation now?" I mean, it's all volunteer, right? It's all a volunteer thing, but they didn't have anyone who was active with the foundation that had a publishing background there were a lot of projects that needed doing. So one of the first ones that I worked on was getting 4 of PB's books republished. I mentioned The Wisdom of the Overself, and there were 3 others. And the other 4 were still in print. And so those 8 books comprise the body of work that I consider core for PB. It's really, you could start with Search and Secret India and read through his books just the way they were done chronologically, and you would have a real course in Eastern spirituality and also how it interfaces with Western science and Western thinking. So, however, this book was originally published by Paul Brunton's son. After the archive became available, after PB died, the archive became available, and his son Kenneth remembered that there were essays in this archive that were really quite good. So he pulled a number of them together, and the first edition of this book came out in 1984. In my opinion, the book wasn't I wanted to organize it differently. The book was out of print. It sold, I don't know, it didn't have a very well-focused audience. Like, who is this for? Why should I buy this book? But I knew this material is a gold mine for a spiritual practice. So it was the only other volume that really remained to be done, even though it was done by PB's son. A lot had gone into it, and I just thought, no, if I reorganize this and take out a couple of the essays that I didn't think fit in with the theme, and I added some material that I thought really was important to the theme, that were, two other essays that PB wrote, it would be a really dynamite book for practice. And I wish I had had this book in 1969.